Hello everyone. Today I wanted to talk about traditional festivals and events across Europe that cluster around this time of year. I want to talk about them because they often get neglected, but I feel that they are a crucial part of our calendar and are due for a revival of sorts. Now I'm going to refer mainly to what goes on in Britain because that's where I'm from and that's my heritage, but there are many similarities in the festivals that I'm going to talk about across Europe, and these kind of cluster around Twelfth Night, Epiphany, Plough Monday, that sort of time. That's what I'm going to talk about today. So after the magic and headiness of Yule, the new year can be regarded as a bit boring. All the feasting and merrymaking is over, and now it's time to get our heads down, get on a diet, get the Allen Carr book out, go down the gym and recoup our money. Now I do think the month of January does have that element of being responsible and planning for the future, establishing a solid foundation, and which is all well and good, but there is also another ignored or neglected tradition that accompanies this time, although it does still exist in remnants, and that is the tradition, and it's a really important one, of what I call raising the sap. Now during January the plants are still asleep, and although some may be budding, there's not very much going on really. The male hazel tree begins to put forth its catkins this time of year in anticipation of pollinating the female, but other than that it is quiet and cold. So the traditions going on at this time of year, there's quite a few of them, and it can be difficult to unpick them as some of them have been amalgamated into others or moved around a bit. At least that's what's happened in Britain. An example of this is the British tradition of eating Christmas cake and Christmas pudding. The heavy rich fruit cakes and puddings, which are traditional in my country during Yule, are thought to have originally been eaten on Twelfth Night. Now Twelfth Night used to be a much bigger event in Britain than it is now. Elaborately decorated cakes with the traditional dried pea and bean, which is quite common across Europe, would have been the centrepiece of Twelfth Night festivities. Now whoever found the pea and the bean would be crowned the Lady and Lord of Misrule and would dictate the evening entertainment and would basically be in charge of whatever happened during that evening. The tradition was that the whole world was turned upside down for one night. So in bigger houses you would get the servants being in charge of the Lord and Lady of the manor, or the children being in charge rather than the parents, and as I said, everything will be turned upside down before returning to normal the next day for Epiphany. Now this tradition continued until the Victorian ages, until it was outlawed for being too rowdy and raucous. The cake tradition got moved to Christmas and has remained there in Britain ever since. Now it's worth pointing out that in the old Julian calendar, Twelfth Night was the actual night of Yule or Christmas, and in Britain this time of year is still sometimes referred to as Old Christmas. Now as the festival of Epiphany predates Christmas in the Christian calendar as to what was first celebrated when, it seems clear to me that some of these traditions around this time of year of Epiphany are very old indeed. Another tradition practised on Twelfth Night was the tradition of wassailing. Now wassailing comes to us from the ancient Scandinavians, and the Anglo-Saxon greeting wassail, which is not that unfamiliar to English people, means to be healthy or good health. This tradition has been revived to a degree in some parts of England, and it is quite common in the apple and pear orchards of the west of England to have wassail festivals, especially in the past few years. That's happening more and more. During wassail festivals, the ceremonial tree will have a libation of cider or ale poured over its roots as a blessing and to encourage a good coming harvest. Sometimes a mummers play is performed. Now, for those who aren't sure what a mummers play is basically a traditional play which involves folkloric or archetypal beings such as a Green Man or St George, and often some kind of battle is enacted. Mummers plays can happen at different times of the year, and they're normally associated with different festivals. The word mummers basically means someone in disguise, and it refers to an ancient practice known as guising, and it also has an element of being silent or hidden, as in the old English saying to keep mum. Now, in these mummers plays, especially around the time of wassail, pans are clattered or drums are beaten, and all of these are ways of waking up the spirits of the tree, apparently, and encouraging the tree to grow. In other parts of the country, wassailers travelled from house to house carrying with them a wassail bowl, which was usually filled with some kind of mulled ale drink. Specific wassail songs, a bit like Christmas carols, would be sung and the bowl would be shared around. So it's easy to see why all this pagan revelling got some of the Victorians a bit hot under the collar. Sometimes bits of bread or toast were dipped in the wassail bowl and were stuck on the ends of the branches of the trees. In the Shetland Isles around this time was the festival of Apelia, which I think roughly translates as end of holy time, but I can't be sure of that, but I think that's kind of what it means. The modern day festival is now celebrated at the end of January, but traditionally it was celebrated at around Epiphany, and it was a time when people would burn tar barrels, they would roll down hills, so there's some sunwheel symbolism in there, and young boys would go out and make mischief. Now, there's a sense that this mischief making, I think, and this kind of the turning everything upside down, the Lord and Lady of Misrule, it's part of rousing everyone out of the magic of Yule. So I think part of these traditions were also about raising the sap. They were part of waking people up. This complete topsy-turvy change were part of waking people up from the slumber of Yule and raising the sap in people. I do think that was part of what was going on there. Excuse me. Other ceremonies include the very interesting Haxey Hood, which could be a discussion in and of itself, and maybe I will do that another time. Now, the Haxey Hood takes place on the Isle of Axholme in Lincolnshire. This event is said to have its origins in medieval times, whereby the local lady of the manor lost her riding hood in one of the fields, and the ensuing chase by the workers to retrieve it has been reenacted every year since. The hood basically consists of a long leather stick called the sway hood, and it's snaked all over the fields between teams who operate kind of like a rugby scrum, and it's manoeuvred by these teams into the pub that they represent, and whichever pub gets the hood in there keeps the hood over the bar for a year, and that's basically what it's about. So although there is obviously an obvious fertility symbolism there, I think also this fact of a game, it's quite masculine and boisterous. Again, it's something else to rise the sap, really, I think. Now, another tradition which occurs all over Europe and also in Britain, I have to say, is this tradition of swimming in cold water. Now, in Britain, this has been moved to Boxing Day or New Year's Day, but this swim in cold water happens quite frequently, especially in some of the Orthodox countries, and it does happen here too, but it's in a more low-key fashion. We get things like Boxing Day, New Year dips, and often they're associated with raising money for charity. I know that in the Orthodox countries, there's often a retrieving a cross that often happens because it's all caught up in Epiphany, but I suspect this is based on an older tradition, and I wonder if, especially in the case of these water ceremonies. It's not just an act of cleansing or renewal, which it could be, but also one to get the blood rising, a symbolic act to get our creative juices going as we begin the year. It's also worth noting that the Monday after Epiphany was known in England as Plough Monday, and in rural societies horses were decorated with ribbons and brasses for their first day back at work. Plough Monday was also a time of celebration and merrymaking. Now, I'm not sure how much work got done that day, because apparently it was a bit of an easy day at work, shall we say. But I'm just pointing all these things out because it seems that our ancestors had a much healthier approach to work and pleasure than we do. They knew how to enjoy themselves through Yule, and as Twelfth Night approached, they knew how not only to get themselves back to work, but to celebrate doing so with renewed vigour. And I think it's an idea for us to look to them and how they did things, and see how we can incorporate that into our own lives. But anyway, however you celebrate Plough Monday and this time of year and getting back to work, I hope your coming work year is filled with health and vigour. That's all I've got to say today, really. But thanks for listening anyway, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.